All right, welcome. What's up? This is Shikata Ganai. We're here going to do another video. And this one won't be part of any particular series like the Pop and other server drop one or the Bounty Hunter Essential ones. This will be kind of by itself. This is more geared towards incident response and red team type of tactics using something they call Mitre. So in the security world, in cybersecurity world, they have this site here called Mitre, and it's free to use for any company out there. So if your company is looking to make things like playbooks for incident response, or if they're looking to do some red team tabletops, whatever, this is a good way to actually do it. At the place that I work at, I lead the tabletops and the red team stuff. So I would actually do certain attacks following this Mitre Att&ck Framework, and then we would use this and sit down with the incident response team as an after-action review and kind of go over what I did and how it maps to this particular matrix. So this is a good way for your company, as far as you being a cybersecurity professional, to kind of use this as your main driver for red team, for tabletop, for incident response, and to create your own playbooks, essentially using active defense. I'll probably break this up into a couple different videos. First one being mainly geared towards what Mitre Att&ck is, how it can be used with like the navigator, and also some red team, atomic red team kind of stuff to go along with it to kind of show what I do for myself, for my company, as far as the red team inside of it. And then another one, we're going to start implementing what they call active defense and actually create a, let's say, ransomware playbook, or we'll just pick one at random using these particular frameworks. So when you look at the Mitre Att&ck framework here, you have what they call a matrix down here below, and it looks kind of daunting when you look at it for the first time. You're probably looking at it going, oh, dear God, that is a lot of stuff. But basically, up here on the top, you got what they call tactics, essentially, and then below it, you'll have what they call techniques. And what this whole Mitre Att&ck framework is it's a collection or a knowledge base of attacks that have already been done. So not 0 day or anything. These are ones that are known, and these are hack groups, essentially, that are known, and their techniques. So for instance, if there was a particular well-known nation-state hacker group out of I don't know, Iran or something, they would show up here under the groups section, and you could kind of look and see what they typically do and how they did their attacks. For instance, like with ransomware, you have ones that are some groups that are associated with that. One of them is called Wizard something, I can't remember the name, but they actually utilize different ransomware attacks. So if you want to prepare for a ransomware attack, you can use the information from this Mitre Att&ck framework to look at threat actors that have done this in the past and were successful. And you can look at what their techniques were to do what they were doing. That way you can kind of shore up a defense against it, because as G.I. Joe said, right? What did they say? Something about knowledge and power. I'm trying to remember now, back to my 80s childhood days. No one is half the battle. I think that's what it was. So essentially, that's what we're trying to implement here. So with Mitre Att&ck, this is a great full resource for you. So let's take a look here at some of the tactics. Now, in this case, they have it broken up into two different things. You have enterprise, which is typically what you'll use for your own corporation. And then you also have mobile. Now, I haven't messed with the mobile one yet, but let's just mess with the enterprise. So on this one here, you have a variety of different tactics that everybody has kind of gathered from historical data of major cyber attacks against different corporations, against different governments, things like that. And they've kind of broken it down into 12 specific tactics that they've seen over and over and over. And as you can see through down here on the left, right over here, you can see the different parts where it says reconnaissance, resource development, initial access, that sort of thing. And they have a particular ID number associated with it so that you can actually use this, like I mentioned, in a playbook kind of fashion, and you can reference these particular ID numbers for your incident response team as the red teamer, right? So let's take a look at just one, for instance. So if you look at reconnaissance, over here, it'll tell you the ID number that it's associated with. So if we're saying we're making a plan for ourselves and we want to find out what an attacker would do for reconnaissance, against my company. And typically what you would do is you would say, well, this is my company and this is what they do. Let's look at other companies and what they do. And let's see if they have been attacked previously. And then let's see what the threat actors have done against them so that we can kind of get an idea of what they're going to look to do to us. So in this case here, if I want to get a plan together to say what kind of reconnaissance would these threat actors do, these are some different techniques that they'll use. Active scanning IP blocks, vulnerability scanning, gathering victim host information, hardware, software, all kinds of different techniques. And these techniques are broken into sub-techniques as well, which like .001, .002, and things of that nature. Okay, so they're all listed down under here. So again, these are the actual tactics over here on the left, but the techniques are something different. They're the actual, what do they do? What kind of things do these threat actors do in this case here? One that's pretty common is like defense evasion, right? Because nowadays, it's kind of like in the old days when they used to have a lot of the malware and you had the old school rats where you had like JP Virus Maker, you know, Dark Comet, all those old school rat programs. And it was actual malware that was installed on the machine. That's still around, but attackers are tending to go a lot more towards what they call fileless or running in-memory attacks using things like PowerShell, because a lot of times they can bypass the all CNI of an antivirus if it's running in memory. I know for a fact, in my instance, that Symantec did not catch a few of the ones that I did against our company at a red team exercise because I was using in-memory attacks using PowerShell. So it does. Some of them do have a hard time with that. Now, some of the more, I guess you could say, dedicated ones that are out there, the endpoint protection. I think they just call it endpoint protection, or I think that's the general acronym they give it to it. So you got like CrowdStrike, Carbon Black, things like that. Those will typically apply more artificial intelligence to it. They'll apply a little bit more, how shall we say, behavioral or anomaly-based type of approach to it. So it would actually be able to detect some of those fileless ones as well. So those are good ones to use. All right, so we see here again under the list here, we got all kinds of different tactics. And then if we look here under techniques, we can just break them down by techniques in this case here. And there's quite a few of them, as you can see, as we go down through. These are all just things that we have seen historical data of threat actors doing against different entities and victims and such. And then over here, you also have groups. And these would be your typical groups. When they say APT, they're talking about Advanced Persistent Threat. And these would be your groups that are well-known, and they've kind of given them this tag. For instance, right here, APT-1. Let's just pick one out of random here. It says that they are a Chinese threat group that's been attributed to the Second Bureau of People's Liberation Army, commonly known by its military unit cover designator, whatever. And this is the typical group that you would see out there for advanced persistent threat, and any associated groups with it that kind of do the same type of attacks. One in particular, like for ransomware, there's one called Gold Southfield right here. So this one here, you'll notice that they do ransomware as a service is typically what they'll see. So if we're trying to make a playbook for ransomware, we would kind of look at the tactics used by Gold Southfield. And for instance, we would see this tool, Revil, that is used typically by this group to do ransomware as a service. So we can actually do some reconnaissance and some information gathering about Revil and try to get some signatures for Yara signatures, that sort of thing, just so we can kind of catch if that tool is being used against us, and we can kind of understand it's a ransomware type of attack. So that's why this information is so important to defenders for blue teams and such, to be able to look at this and say, okay, well, let me break it down by just one topic at a time for a playbook, and we'll see all groups that are associated, that have been associated with different ransomware attacks, that sort of thing. Another thing they also have is the mitigations as well. So they'll tell you the basic mitigations for a particular attack. The best way to look at that is by going and looking at techniques. And we'll just pick one right here, bypass user account control. If this happens to be one that you are planning for and you want to defend against, and you're saying, my company has a gap in this particular problem of people being able to bypass user account control, you would kind of look over here first and you would see the tactics that it's associated with is privilege escalation and defense evasion, right? Which would be why we're doing the bypass user account control so that we can bypass evasion. In this case, we can see that it's geared toward Windows. There's also Linux and Mac OS ones. And it says here what the required permissions would be, administrator or user, because you can go ahead and elevate privileges for that. And they got all kinds of different things here. But as you scroll down, first it gives you a description of it right here, of what they are talking about when they say bypass UAC controls, that sort of thing. And then we go down through and we see procedure examples, and we start seeing all these different groups that have used this tactic, or I'm sorry, this technique to bypass account controls. And down through here, as you can see, you can click on any of these here and be able to see exactly what they did, what kind of tools are being used, that sort of thing. And then when you scroll down a little further, they'll start getting into mitigations. And it will say here's some things you can do to mitigate this happening to you, to your company. First, you would do an audit where you do check for common UAC bypass weaknesses. And they got reference numbers over here where you can actually read about real-time events and real-time articles about that. Privilege account management, updating your software to the latest version, the user account control, making sure the highest level of enforcement's there, that sort of thing. And it just basically just gives you some ideas as a blue team, essentially as a defense, to say this is what I would do to mitigate this deal. Now later when we get into what they call active defense, it's a little bit different than this. This is more of it is a proactive approach to mitigate, but the active defense is something that we're actually doing physically to entice hackers in so we can actually get a lot more detail about how they're doing things. And we'll get into that a little bit later. And then for the people that monitor, the incident response teams that monitor 24/7 at your network, they want to know what do I look for in the case of this particular technique. This will go through all the different detections that you can use, what certain registry keys you're looking at, that sort of thing to set up alerts for. So you can see it's a pretty well thought out, well planned, full resource for pretty much everything that you would need to do. So the way I would use this at your company, for instance, is if you have a red team internal that will actually do, and by red team I mean an actual offensive team that will actually go ahead and perform attacks against the company. And then typically you'll call it blue team, purple team, whatever you want to call them. There's all kinds of weird names they give them, but we'll just say offense and defense, right? So the offensive would be typically called red team coming against, and the actual incident response team, we would want to check and see, are they catching what I'm doing? Are they doing it in real time? How long does it take for them to respond? Do they know the chain of custody of who to bring these to? Do we need to notify legal immediately because this is a breach for data, that sort of thing. So one way that you can do this as a red team kind of thing, you can make up your own tactics or your own plays if you want. But there's also this one here. This one's called Atomic Red Team. This is a really good red. I think it's called Red Canary, if I'm not mistaken, is the name of the guys that do this. But they've already put together a lot of different tests for each one of these different tactics. Now, some of them will say contributed tests. That means they haven't put an actual physical attack that you can do in this particular framework yet, but you can add it to it. So you can use this as a jump point. So for example, let's look at defense evasion. So if I wanted to test my defense team at work, if they're actually able to detect if I'm coming in, if they're able to detect tools and techniques that I'm using to get into the system by using defense evasion techniques on my side, I would do these particular things. So for instance, this one I actually did at my work, and it worked. It was actually pretty effective. We'll just take Bits jobs for a second. So Bits, if you're not familiar with Bits, it runs things. It's called the Background Intelligent Transfer Service, and it's essentially an asynchronous file transfer mechanism that you'll find in Windows. Some things it uses it for is for like Windows Update server, those sort of things. So this is a common tool that's already in Windows, and typically you don't want to give full privileges to do whatever you want with this particular tool. You want to kind of leave that scoped out to admins, that sort of thing. So down here, if you scroll down through, these are exact attacks that you can do. How cool is that, right? They already kind of list everything out for you. This is your cheat sheet to be able to red team it in your company. Now, of course, again, you can do any ones you want, but if you want it to map, or you want to see how it maps specifically to Mitre, this is a great way to do it, because as you see here, it actually maps to Mitre, right? So we see all the different all the different tactics up here, and as I showed you here under matrices, we can see those right there: initial access, defense evasion, privilege escalation. So it actually maps specifically to it, which is pretty awesome. So anyways, let's go back here to the bits job. So here, I actually ran these at mine, and my team actually caught this one, but they didn't catch the PowerShell one. So that was kind of cool, interesting to find out. So essentially they're saying on this one here, do this, bits admin, transfer, download. And essentially what they've done is they actually have a file up here being hosted by them that you can try to download. The idea behind this attack here is to see if our defense team is monitoring for when we use a tool like bits admin to actually download something from an untrusted site, one that we don't know, an unknown site, and able to download it here to the actual machine. Now, on this red kit area I found, I had to go through some of these because I think some of these are actually missing. So it's a good idea first to check by visiting it and making sure it's there. Okay, so down here, it has a variety of different things, that you can run, but we don't really care about what's the content of it. We just want to see, can we download this from an unknown source? This is a GitHub user source. So when it says bits admin, transfer, download, priority, foreground. So when it does this hashtag remote file, you basically take out all of that and you put this in here because that's what's associated with remote file. So again, take out the hashtags, take all this out, and just put this in this place. Same thing with the local file. You take all of this out and you replace it with this, or call it whatever you want, right? Chuck Norris, Leroy Jenkins.ps1, whatever. And your goal in this case here, and what happened on my end, I'm just from personal experience, is I was able to run this, and it was able to download and put this flag in the C drive of the user that I was logged in. So I had a test account for the tabletop, and this was able to run, but they did catch it. Red Cloak was the tool that caught it from SecureWorks. So that was pretty cool. But the one that didn't get caught was this PowerShell one here. So again, they give you all kinds of different real-time attacks you can run that will actually translate to what you need to do here. Now, another interesting thing too is they'll tell you specifically in here in this selection here if you have to be admin to do it. Now, I know there's always some sort of debate between some people that do red teams or do tabletops where people say, well, it's not successful tabletop or a red team if they caught us or something like that, or it's not really a real test if the guy is already got an admin account for the test account, right? In my opinion, the goal of what this whole tabletop kind of stuff would be is to see if our defense catches it. And if I have to run it as an admin, that's fine to me, because all we're trying to do is seeing, did they catch it? Do they know what they're looking at? Can they actually break down the attack step by step by what I ran for commands? And how quick can they respond to it? That's mainly what I'm using it for at my workplace. If I don't win, if I don't actually get one through and they catch me, good, that's awesome. I'm not down, I'm not depressed about that. That's what we're looking for. So that's my opinion. There are different opinions about that, but this is perfect for that sort of thing. But they'll tell you specifically, hey, you're going to need an admin account to do this. What they're doing is they're saying, we're simulating that the attacker broke in and they elevated privileges. So now they're doing post-exploitation techniques. That's kind of what that's for when they do that. This one in particular doesn't need admin. Okay, this one I was able to run as a standard user with no issue, so it's pretty cool. So anyways, they got a whole slew of these here. These are just a few just for bits download. I just want to point those out. But as you go down through them, you'll see there's a ton of them here, like account manipulation. There's another one here for PowerShell. It's specific. Somewhere down here. This one here, deobfuscate, decode files for information. Pretty interesting one. If you go down through it, it'll show you what you would need to run in this particular case and whether or not you need to be able to run it as admin, which is awesome. This is cool too. Here it talks about where some research has been done by another company like FireEye. for this one here. But this is an interesting one. You can use Cert Utility to actually download files too, which is kind of cool. But anyways, it shows you everything you need to do to run, everything you need to do to clean up, and you can actually document all this for your tabletop after action review, and you can say, hey, this is what I ran, right? And if they're wondering, what does this map to? Well, up here on the top, you can see T1140. Okay, so let's say I ran these attacks in my tabletop as the red team guy, right? So I'm running these attacks, and they got through. I was able to pop calculator, whatever the deal is. Now, in the after action review, if they didn't catch it, or even if they did catch it, if I want to go ahead and let them know, okay, here's what you need to research to make sure this does not happen again, I can point them to an actual Mitre Att&ck Framework. So I would say T1140, and I would come back here, and I could search specifically for T1140 and see if anything comes up, and it will be tied to a specific part of Mitre Att&ck. And sometimes it takes a while to kind of look through all this stuff here. So if it does take that long, oh, there it is right there. Deobfuscate, decode files for information technique, right there. So you click that, and now you can tell them that they can look at this ID, and they can say, okay, this is what, I did against them. What is it? What did he do? And they can look down through it, and they can see some examples of how other people did the same thing to other companies. And then down below, further down, they can look at the mitigations, if there are any. So this one here is talking about how it can't be easily mitigated, typically because of the deobfuscation part of it itself. It's using actual system features. But if it did have mitigations, it would be listed here. And here it can actually show detection. Probably a better one to show than this, because this is not, this one's kind of an anomaly, is that one that I did there. Because this actually, I went over this in an after action review with my team. So the bits job one. So I had them on our incident response team, I had them go to this location here and look it up under search. And actually, you can just put it right up here to be quicker. Right up in the URL there. And go directly to the bits job one. And over here, what they can do is they can kind of see all the different required users' accounts that would be there. It gives a little description what it is. And then down further, you can see mitigations here. So essentially, if I were to rerun this attack again 2 months later, I'm hoping that they would actually be able to stop or detect or any of that stuff based on them putting these mitigations in place. So you're kind of holding their toes to the fire, saying, listen, we've given you the tools and the knowledge to make sure this doesn't happen again. It's on you, defense team, to put it in play. But it's like I said, it's easy for them to understand. It's easy for them to look at and say, okay, here's what he did. Here's what I can do to mitigate it. Here's how I can detect it, that sort of thing. So this is a great tool to be able to determine all that kind of stuff there, okay? So I would highly recommend doing this sort of thing for your red teams, for your tabletops, your incident response planning, that sort of thing. In the other red team stuff up here, if you go back here to the Red Canary one listed here, Atomic Red Team, they also have some other ones if your environment includes a lot of Linux, which is over here. And you also have a bunch of different Mac OS ones too. So you can see here, and I'll put these links in the description of the video here, but you can see there's specific ones that are for Linux as well, right? And again, if there isn't one here, then you can kind of research and determine how you're going to actually do this attack and put your own in, or you can contribute here on their site, which would be pretty awesome to do if you did that. But anyways, this shows a variety of different Linux specific ones as well. So yeah, I think this is a great addition to your team and for your workplace to be able to determine how you can start making playbooks as far as what you can try to expect, what you can look for mitigations, for detection, and then for the other side, the offensive side, or a team that's at your workplace, it gives them some ideas of some different ones you can run, specifically that you can document and you can point to an actual Mitre ID number by using those particular Atomic Red teams. So in the next video, what we'll do is we're going to get into the active defense part of it, and we're going to go over the Navigator and how you can use the Navigator with Mitre to put together a ransomware playbook, and what type of active defense techniques you can use and what is active defense in general. So I hope you join me for that next one. Until then, see ya. Have a good day.